How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weatherspoon 5000, and in this video we're going to focus on potential Tropical Cyclone 2, which is likely to become Hurricane Bonnie in the very near future, and determine the impacts you should expect along Central America as well as the northern portion of South America. And we'll also talk about two tropical disturbances that also have a chance of developing. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So let's begin by taking a look at the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook. And of course, we now have potential Tropical Cyclone 2, which now is pretty much inevitably gonna strengthen into Tropical Storm Bonnie and potentially Hurricane Bonnie in the more long-term future. As you can see, the millibar pressure is centered right around 1,009 millibars with its maximum sustained winds of 40 miles per hour. So while it does have the wind strength to be considered a tropical storm, there isn't enough rotation around the center circulation on all sides of the area of low pressure for this to be considered a tropical storm just yet, as it really needs a very small well-defined center circulation where winds are pretty much rotating around in all directions at a high enough wind speed. And we aren't seeing that just yet, but it's expected to happen within the next at least 48 hours, and if not, it should pretty much guaranteed happen within the next 5 days. So still expect Tropical Storm Bonnie within the very near future. And we're also taking a look at these two other disturbances which could develop. It has currently a low chance, but it's at least something to be aware of. But we're going to focus more on potential Tropical Cyclone 2, which will likely become Tropical Storm Bonnie and eventually Hurricane Bonnie, as it could become a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane. So take a look at the current water vapor satellite imagery, and you see that the convection is very spread out, and typically tropical cyclones don't necessarily like that. But if we were to take a look at the imagery over the past several hours, you do see that there's a little bit more convection going on the western portion of this storm, as is where the center circulation is located. We're going to need to see that convection blow up a little bit more before this could be considered a tropical storm, because while it does have the wind speed to be considered a tropical storm, it doesn't necessarily have that rotation or that well-defined center circulation to be considered a tropical storm. And that will happen once we do see a little bit more lift and convection in the atmosphere, and we do see just a slight amount of dry air just to the north of it. But this won't, I don't think it's going to necessarily hinder this storm much as it continues to move westward, because it's going to have a very small circulation, so it won't absorb a large area of air around it that's from a very far distance away. And this dry air, relative to the size of this storm, is pretty far away for this low pressure system to absorb it. So as a result, this dry air won't necessarily be an inhibiting factor with this storm, which is definitely concerning, because it's expected, because it will encourage a more gradual strengthening process as it continues to move westward. Now take a look at the current wind shear. This is also another major concern, because you see that it's under a fairly lightly sheared environment, so it does have a much easier path for this to really develop a well-organized center of circulation for this to gradually strengthen as it moves westward. And you see that the wind shear only reduces more as it heads further westward, closer to the coast of Venezuela and Colombia, where this storm is expected to track through. So there's definitely a major concern. Now, the computer models, there's certain computer models such as the European model expecting a little bit more wind shear that's going to impact this whole pressure system, which would definitely be good news. We really need to see this upper level high move into right around the Dominican Republic area and become stronger, for the upper level winds to become stronger. But as of right now, it seems like all signs are pointing to this strengthening into a hurricane, and I wouldn't be surprised if the computer models are underestimating the strength of this, because it definitely isn't looking good. If I were to take a look forward to see the wind shear map forecast from the GFS model. So you see that the low pressure is located right around here, and you see, of course, the wind shear is very light. We do have a small upper level high, but most of the winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere are relegated further southward, right around Venezuela and Colombia, and isn't really affecting this low pressure system. It will encounter, the GFS model is expecting a little bit more wind shear within the next 24 hours, as a result again of an upper level high developing that just to the east of it. And we should see this upper level high continue to move eastward along with this low pressure system, which will at least keep a little bit of shear over this low pressure system. The wind shear is definitely a little bit more difficult to forecast, so maybe it's stronger. That's what the European model is forecasting, and that will be huge in determining the strength of this storm, because this is really the only inhibiting factor. Sea surf temperatures are going to be much warmer than average. The dry air, it seems pretty much inevitable that not much dry air is going to entrain the center of circulation. So really, all we need to hope is really that we're going to see a strong enough upper level high to bring those stronger upper level winds to the around surrounding the low pressure system. And you see that we do have an upper level high located right between Cuba and Hispaniola, and another upper level high located just to the east of this storm. So those two upper level highs will be key. The position of them will be key in determining how much upper level winds there will be and how strong this storm will eventually be. So at this point, it seems like the GFS model is expecting this to become maybe a strong tropical storm or a hurricane at landfall. As you see that the wind shear does lighten quite a bit, but I'd say the time it passes the northern tip of Colombia, pretty much just open area between the tip of Colombia towards the Nicaragua coast, there's going to be a very open area where the wind shear will be very light. And while the European model is expecting a little bit more wind shear, the concerning part of it is that even the European model is forecasting pretty much a very open lane for this low pressure system strengthen, because you see that the wind shear will be, I'd say, moderate to light for the most part throughout the southern Caribbean as this low pressure system hugs the Venezuela coast. But if I were to continue to move forward, you see that the wind shear pretty much diminishes right between this area of Colombia and the coast of Nicaragua and Costa Rica. So that's only a major concern. Both of the main computer models are expecting an area where the wind shear will be very light. So as a result, it is expected that a hurricane should make landfall right around Central America. The hope is that we will see a little bit stronger wind shear, but it definitely isn't looking good. So I'd say in Panama and Costa Rica, it's best Panama, Costa Rica, as well as Nicaragua, I'll say it's best to prepare now. It's better to be safe than sorry. It seems like a landfalling, at least strong tropical storm or hurricane is likely at this point, so you need to prepare accordingly. And also the northern coast of Venezuela and Colombia, you need to prepare. While the storm won't be at its maximum intensity while it's hugging the coast of Venezuela and Colombia, there's still going to be very heavy rainfall, and you need to keep in mind that flooding is one of the leading causes of weather-related deaths around the world. So you need to prepare accordingly throughout Colombia and the northern coast of Venezuela as well for some heavy rainfall, because it is likely as the storm continues to move westward. And in terms of the relative humidity in the mid levels of the atmosphere, isn't looking good either. Taking a look at the European model, while there is quite a bit of dry air just to the north and a little bit towards west of this storm, you see that the storm circulation is so small that it isn't really entraining that dry air. Because the thing is with small storms is that they only absorb air that's within a short distance away from each other, because of course the circulation and the winds associated with the low pressure system are in such a small area that it isn't able to entrain air that's very far away from it. And you see that the dry air, while there is a lot of it, it's too far away for this low pressure system to really absorb it into the center of circulation to maybe stabilize this storm a little bit and weaken it. So as a result, dry air won't be much of an issue, and it's even more so certain with the GFS model, where you see that this storm is expected to completely get swallowed up by moisture, which is definitely something to keep in mind. And in terms of the track forecast, it seems likely it's pretty much inevitable at this point. We're gonna see a track that's going to hug the Venezuela and Colombia coast at this time. We're going to see just enough ridging associated with this Bermuda Azores high just to the north of it, which is going to steer it west and keep it southward. There isn't any weakness in ridging to really steer this northward. It does become a little bit more uncertain once it makes landfall, because the GFS model wants to take it a little bit northward, where it could maybe bring some more heavy rain towards Mexico, while the European model in fact wants to bring this to Eastern Pacific and re-strengthen it into an Eastern Pacific hurricane, which is definitely another thing you're going to need to watch along the Pacific coast if that were the case. But there's still a little bit more uncertainty regarding the forecast once it makes landfall. But I'll make sure to keep you guys updated, but most likely it'll stay right around the western coast of Mexico beyond landfall. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So pretty much the point I'm trying to make is that a hurricane is likely to develop. The conditions seem favorable. There's going to be a high amount of humidity and a high amount of lift in the atmosphere for this low pressure system to continue to intensify as it heads westward, and the sea surface temperatures are warm enough to support for a rapid amount of intensification. And the only really inhibiting factor would be the wind shear, but at this point it does seem like the wind shear will be enough to completely weaken this from at least a strong tropical storm. So most likely we're going to see a hurricane potentially make landfall along Central America, so you need to prepare accordingly. Now, taking a look at the model intensity guidance, we do see that quite a bit of the ensemble members now are taking this towards category 1 status, and we even see some reaching category 2 status. However, it's important to keep in mind with the model intensity guidance that a lot of these models tend to underestimate this storm strength, so it's more likely that the average wind speed will be higher than what you see here. So I think a category 1 hurricane at the very minimum is very likely at this point, especially closer to landfall. So that's something to keep in mind. And in terms of the track forecast, you see that pretty much all the tracks are moving along taking the southern track that's hugging the coast of Venezuela and Colombia and making landfall pretty much mostly right in between the border of Costa Rica and Honduras, right around Nicaragua. So you need to prepare in Nicaragua and maybe even Costa Rica and Honduras as well, because it seems like you will experience hurricane impacts associated with this storm. And you see that beyond landfall, it does become a little bit more uncertain. Some want to take it northward towards Mexico, while some take it as an Eastern Pacific tropical cyclone. We're just going to need to wait and see, but it seems likely that Nicaragua will experience direct impacts associated with this tropical cyclone. Now, taking a look at my forecast when it comes to Hurricane Bonnie and the 2 tropical cyclones in the that could maybe develop, you see that I'm expecting this to gradually intensify over the next several days and maybe reaching hurricane status right around the Thursday time frame at 80 miles per hour. And I expect it to reach peak intensity right between Friday afternoon and Friday night, just before landfall. I'd say it could reach 90 miles per hour, which is a category 1, but borderline a category 2, I'd say, is possible just before landfall. So throughout Nicaragua and Costa Rica, and as well as the northern coast of Venezuela and Colombia, you need to prepare for potentially major impacts associated with this tropical cyclone. And in terms of the 2 other tropical storms, it seems like the wind shear is going to be a little bit too strong, and with this tropical cyclone, it won't really have a lot of time over water, so it's unlikely that it's going to develop. But you still need to pay attention to heavy rain along Texas coast, as well as throughout Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, associated with these 2 tropical disturbances. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys have a great day.